You know, after reviewing the first half of Kick the Bucket and seeing how many little plot lines the episode started, it really makes me wonder if the second half manages to stick the landing in the end. Make sure to check out my last video discussing the first half of the episode to make sure you're all caught up. So, does Kick the Bucket end in a kicker, or will it be a drop in the bucket? Remind me to never use analogies. Now, we continue the episode with Marshmallow mentally wrapping her head around what Bow just revealed to her. She asks Bow how she was able to manipulate Apple to say all those things to her. Bow reveals that she used possession to control Apple and make her look as if she was betraying her. This reveal mostly works. It does make sense that Apple wasn't actually that stupid and just blurted out her master plan to herself. It's also really interesting to see Bow pull off a brash stunt like this. It really does seem like something she would do. But it doesn't make sense that Apple doesn't say a single thing right after she was just possessed. And like I've said before, it's still pretty silly that Marsh doesn't question Apple's completely out of left field actions. I think the scene would have benefited from a more specific set of circumstances, so it would have made more sense. Anyway, Marsh becomes angered by this revelation and says that this incident isn't great for her what's real issue. Doe points out that Bow always seems to do dumb stuff for attention, even by talking to paintings. Bow says that what she did wasn't just for any attention, and that contestants like Apple are the only kind of people Marsh seems to care about ever since she started competing. She thought that she had to stand out in the competition, or else she'd be nothing to Marsh. I find her reasoning to be pretty silly, yet kind of fitting. Like I said, this really does sound like something she would do. Her crave for attention makes sense for her silly character, and yet I feel like it's realistic enough for it to be a believable motive. And so, to further explain her perspective on the competition, Bow then starts to sing a song. Yes, you heard that right. A musical number starts, and she proceeds to sing about what the competition meant to her. This was a surprising turn of events, to say the least. Musical numbers in object shows aren't a very common occurrence, mostly because they're really hard to get right. If you mess up a musical number in your show, you mess it up. It's very difficult to commit to a song, and even very little mistakes can make it sound awkward, forced, or just straight up unenjoyable. I'm also usually not a fan of random musical numbers because it can feel like an unnecessary waste of time that can get the same point across by just having the characters talk normally. So, does this song manage to justify its existence? Yeah, I think so. First of all, it's just a very catchy song. It has a delightful melody and it makes for a very playful atmosphere. The song also uses its time to show the other contestants competing in the challenge, which I think is a very nice touch. It works well for showing Bow's point of view, showing how fun the competition was for her and is for some of the contestants. And since it shows the challenge progressing, it clearly doesn't waste any time. Halfway through the song, Marsh starts to join in and sing about what she doesn't like about the competition. This was another nice addition that shows their different perspectives on the game. It's also very cool to see that once Marsh starts to sing, the more negative aspects of the show are highlighted. The problems and conflicts between the contestants are shown. It's all very fitting for her perspective. The moments in the challenge line up so nicely for both of them, and it makes for a really interesting viewing experience. One could argue that the song becomes sappy and unsubtle at this point. The message of the song becomes very clear, maybe even overwhelmingly so. But personally, I feel like the song is just so enjoyable that I barely care. I think it's the perfect length. It's just long enough for it to feel impactful and short enough that it doesn't overstay its welcome. And that about sums up my thoughts on this song. It accomplishes exactly what it wants to do excellently. The music is delightful, the visuals are on point, and the vocals are very well performed by Dee Cashin and Taylor Groden. This might have been an unexpected piece, but it ended up being a very welcome one.
In fact, when I think of that life, it isn't really living at all.
Now, during this song, we actually get to see MePad viewing the contestants during the challenge. Toilet, MePhone's other co-host, if you could call him that, asks MePad what he's looking at. MePad tells him that he's noticed many of the contestants behaving erratically in a way that eludes him. He notices that they're all focused on pleasing each other, yet none of them are very pleased themselves. He doesn't find this behavior very logical since he believes that one should receive what one provides. It's a very short scene, but it's a very nice detail that shows MePad starting to notice the contestants' strife more than ever, and it implies that he could be starting to question the job that MePhone is assigning to him. But I never fully understood understood what he meant by they all seem to be focused on pleasing each other. From what we've seen in the challenge, barely anyone even interacts with each other. We mainly just see people making discontent facial expressions and just generally being upset. The only example of someone trying to make someone else happy is maybe Lightbulb picking up a ball and smiling at Paintbrush, but that's literally it. Some more examples of what MePad was talking about would have been appreciated. Or he could have just simply pointed out how many of the contestants don't seem very happy, which would also work just fine. Now, after their song, Bow says that if Marsh doesn't like being in the competition, then she should stay in the mansion with her and Doe. Marsh is quickly convinced, but says that first, there's someone she wants to bring with her. We cut back to the challenge, where both teams have gotten their first bullseye. Paintbrush forces Fan to throw a ball, and he makes it while Knife hands a ball to Microphone for her to throw. There seems to be some sort of unspoken rule where no one can throw more than one ball, which is really weird since that was never said to be a rule. In fact, the graphic that was shown for the challenge explanation shows the same person throwing all 3 balls. I'm guessing this happened because they didn't properly explain this in the first half and it was already uploaded, so they couldn't change it. And it would have been really boring to see the same contestant throw all 3 balls. It doesn't make it any less confusing though. It's not a big deal, it's just very noticeable. Mike throws her ball and is about to miss, but she uses her amplified voice to make it hit the target. Look, we're talking about a show where sentient objects compete for a prize and can turn into ghosts. We've seen weirder stuff. This leaves the teams tied each with 1 ball left. Test Tube has her team's final ball, yet is heavily dazed from being used as a water bucket. Knife passes his team's final ball to Balloon, saying that since he keeps talking about proving himself, he should stop whining and just do it. Microphone gives Balloon just one final discouraging comment for good luck, and we have our final standoff. Between a heavily dazed Test Tube and a heavily pressured Balloon, Test Tube manages to win for her team. Nickel acceptingly says, well, that settles it then, leaving Suitcase feeling crushed. Microphone finds a spot where no one can see her and begrudgingly starts talking to Taco again to apologize for not doing what she said. To her surprise, Taco commends her for managing manipulation that functioned inside the rules of the game. She admits that she's impressed with her, leaving Microphone feeling very proud of herself. We cut to Knife noticing Suitcase lying down by the dock as he sits on the edge of it and starts throwing rocks. Ooh, I should write songs. He tells her how from up on the platform during the challenge, he had a good view of her strife. Suitcase tries to brush him off, knowing that Knife isn't known for being a very supportive teammate. Knife says that he doesn't like getting involved, but he asks her why she puts up with Baseball and Nickel in the first place if they never listen to anything she says. Suitcase says that Nickel did listen to her and that it ended up costing her team so much time. Knife says that it sounds like she got set up. He asks her if she honestly thought they were willing to give Balloon a chance, or if she convinced herself since she just really wanted them to. He says that they knew Balloon would fail. They used it as a reason to eliminate him, and it ended up making Suitcase look like she doesn't know what she's doing. Suitcase tries not to listen to him and says that he's great at being cynical and that it must make him so happy. Knife doesn't deny his cynicism, but says that to be happy, it seems that Suitcase is trying to impress some people that she sees as jerks. Suitcase says that she knows who she's gonna vote for. Knife says that she should stick to her choice just as long as she makes her presence known. He hands her a rock, she looks out in the distance, and the scene ends. I adore this scene. It's so cool to see a guy that usually keeps to himself speak to someone who's feeling lost and doesn't know what to do. It's evident that Knife just hates seeing Suitcase not being able to stand up for herself, and it makes his motive feel all the more natural for him. And because of that, the scene feels all the more effective. What's funny is that he's not being the nicest person in the world when talking to her. He's very honest, blunt, and sometimes mean to her. But that just makes it feel like he's talking from a place of truth. He truly believes what he's telling her, which makes it feel real. And it makes Suitcase's reluctance to listen to him make even more sense. But seeing the realization on Suitcase's face is all the more satisfying, just seeing how everything finally clicks with her. It just makes for a scene that's practically executed perfectly. We cut to the elimination, where everyone privately votes for who they want to be sent packing. And this might be my favorite Inanimate Insanity background music to date. What you're hearing right now is called the Tribal Council. I love how it sounds with how dramatic and substantial it feels. And having this track being played while everyone votes is just the best. The intense atmosphere of this scene made my heart start thumping. After Mephone explains how the voting will go, we see Nickel vote for Balloon for obvious reasons, and we also see Knife vote for him. This shows that Knife doesn't really care about who Suitcase votes for, just as long as she votes honestly. It makes sense and I love it. We see Suitcase sliding in Balloon's vote and hovering over the confirmation button. We then cut to the vote reveal. I love seeing everyone shifting around their seats, watching their faces respond to each vote reveal. It's like you know exactly what everyone's thinking just by watching their anticipation and their reactions. You don't need internal monologues or overly long character interactions between each vote reveal. This builds up tension and anticipation incredibly, which is probably why the elimination scenes have become one of my favorite parts of the show. And so after After all of the build-up, in a 1-5 vote with only 1 vote for Nickel, Balloon is eliminated. Balloon disappointedly yet acceptingly says to Suitcase that voting against him must have been hard, but she proved her loyalty to her alliance and he can't hold that against her. He starts making his way to the elimination portal, but Suitcase tells him to stop. She says that for the longest time she's been so unsure of herself, wondering whether or not she should make her presence known. Balloon tries to tell her that he's trying to do her a solid, but it doesn't stop her. Suitcase reveals that she voted for Nickel, to his absolute shock. She tells him that she can't forgive the way he's been treating Balloon. She says that he acts like he's trying to protect her, but he always tries to send her away whenever he can. Nickel is taken aback, but says that Balloon was tearing the two of them apart and that he wanted them to have what they had before. Suitcase says that they barely even had anything before. They don't really even talk to each other. She says that it's never been anything personal between them, and that's not what an alliance is to her. Baseball asks her what it matters. He brings up the time he once talked to her on the docks and asks her if that meant anything to her. She says that Baseball can pretend to care how she feels, but she knows who he really answers to. He says that he disagrees with Nickel's tactics, but he never acts against them. Baseball says that he doesn't answer to anyone and that he's doing his best to keep his team in check, and her accusations are not helping. Nickel realizes that if he only got 1 vote, that must mean Balloon voted for himself. Suitcase says that it's pretty easy to read how everyone would vote, so he decided to be a great friend instead by pitting the blame on himself. That's what a true ally looks like to her. She voted for Nickel because he has never been a true ally to her. Nickel asks her what good it did for her. The only thing she stood for was burning her allies and weakening her chances. He says that as long as he's here, she's never fooling anyone again. MePhone pipes in and says that it's funny he brings that up. Since no one was eliminated last episode, tonight is a double elimination. Since Nickel was the only other contestant to receive a vote, he is eliminated as well. And so right before Nickel leaves, his last words to Suitcase are simply, "It's nothing personal." Balloon is next to leave, right before thanking Suitcase one last time. Microphone makes a graceful exit. Baseball leaves as well, feeling dejected over losing his friend. Knife says to her that this wasn't really what he meant by making her presence known. Suitcase says that she really tried to be a good alliance member, but she just stepped all over it. Knife says that it depends on what an alliance is to her, leaving Suitcase to wonder if she was ever in an alliance in the first place. I do not have enough time in my day to tell you how much I love this scene. Just pretty much everything, from the incredible build-up to the amazing climax to even little details that make me appreciate this scene even more. After seeing Suitcase bottle up what she's thinking whenever she's around Nickel, always having to agree with whatever he tells her to do, it's so satisfying to see her finally unload her mind onto him, and even onto Baseball. Even though Baseball didn't do anything inherently bad, it makes sense for him to get called out for not standing up for her. I also love watching Knife's reactions to Suitcase speaking her mind. I've never seen him so expressive and speechless before. You know exactly what he's thinking just by watching him. Like, this face just reads, "Oh no, she has a point. Why did I start this?" I also really like how even when Balloon knows he's about to leave, he still tries to help Suitcase in his final moments in the game. You can tell that he was caught off guard by Suitcase voting for Nickel, so he just tried to play it off like that was his vote. He wanted the best for Suitcase and her alliance because he thought it was really important to her, and it makes Suitcase standing up for him in the end feel all the more impactful. After Balloon tries to support his friend, Suitcase is able to support him right back. Now, as great as this scene is, I'm not a big fan of how silly it felt like it had to be at some points. I'm guessing that since this scene was so heavy and intense, it had to dial it back a bit with some comic relief. And I guess that's fine. This scene might have been a bit much for some people, so some humor could help calm things down a bit. But some of these gags feel a little forced, and it comes off as pretty awkward to me. I was okay with finding humor in Knife's reactions because that served a purpose. It further emphasized the shock factor in the scene, and it felt natural. Here, it feels like the use of comic relief purely for the sake of toning things down, which isn't bad. I'm just personally not a fan of it. But other than that, I have very few problems with this scene. It is sad to see that when Suitcase actually speaks her mind, she doesn't mesh with her group very well. Again, Nickel isn't evil. He just focuses more on winning the competition and is pretty insensitive. He just really lost it in his final moments in the game. And Baseball just couldn't find it in himself to stand up against his friend. But it's true that they just don't connect, and it's better for her to realize that, stand up for herself, and let them know than to lay low and continue to stay silent about it. The truth hurts. Owning up to it can come with sacrifice, but it can be freeing, and that's exactly what this scene shows. we fade to Marshmallow walking towards Hotel OJ where all the eliminated contestants live. MePad teleports in front of her, presumably to try and talk her out of exiting the show's parameters, but this time he doesn't stop her. This again seems to be hinting at how MePad seems to be becoming more against the idea of having the contestants compete. And I'm really interested in seeing what he'll be doing about it in later episodes. Marshmallow, politely gets Apple's attention from outside the hotel. And Apple sees Marsh right outside, ready to be Apple's friend again. That's where the episode ends. This second half really blew me away. The theming, the music, the writing, it's all just so good. I feel like the three main storylines in this entire episode were Microphone and Taco storyline, Marshmallow and Bow storyline, and Suitcase's alliance plus Balloon storyline. I can't imagine how difficult it must have been to make these three plots all intertwine with each other, and it was somehow pulled off so seamlessly. Not only that, these storylines also managed to benefit from each other and sometimes affect each other, which makes for a very well connected story. Here's an example of what I'm talking about. It's evident that a large reason as to why Balloon lost his team the challenge in this episode is because he kept thinking about what Microphone told him before the challenge. She wouldn't have done this if it weren't for Taco telling her to take a drastic measure, which led her to think of a compromise. Taco wouldn't have told her to take this drastic measure if it weren't for Nickel and Baseball, who gave Suitcase the choice of giving Balloon his large role in the challenge, which left Balloon in a vulnerable position. You notice how the characters' specific interactions and decisions directly affect each other? Baseball and Nickel giving Suitcase that choice in turn made them lose the challenge, and that wouldn't have happened without each character's unique interactions and decisions. And it doesn't stop there. Since Balloon lost his team the challenge, Suitcase felt horrible about giving him the role, which led to Knife noticing her strife. This led to him deciding to talk to her after the challenge, which means that if Balloon didn't lose the challenge, that amazing scene by the dogs wouldn't have happened. There would be no need for it, which in turn means that we wouldn't get that incredible elimination scene. This is a story that could never have had its emotional highs without these specific characters and their actions. It wouldn't be quite the same with different characters. The Marshmallow and Bow storyline didn't affect the other storylines much, but it absolutely benefited from them. Their song took advantage of the emotional turmoil in all of their storylines and used it to further emphasize the negative effect the show has on the characters and their relationships. The song wouldn't have been nearly as effective without the visual connections the song displayed. It is incredible how each storyline works off of each other. So many characters are hurt by other ones, but in the end they ended up learning from their experiences. It feels like this episode really prioritized character conflicts over the competition itself. It made for a much more engaging narrative overall. I've never before seen such realistic characters in an object show, ever. Characters like Suitcase, Baseball, Balloon, Marshmallow, Bow, and even Knife have really changed after this episode. And you know what I think about all of that? I think it's beautiful. I think it's truly beautiful.